What's going on, everybody? It's the Fantasy Football Almanac back at it with another fantasy football video. Today we are going to be talking about part 2 of the lessons learned from week 12 of the 2022 NFL season. Before we get into it, if you guys could go down, give this video a like. Again, I'm answering every single fantasy football related comment. So if you guys have any questions related to fantasy football, please let me know down below in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Turn that notification bell on so you don't miss another video. With that, guys, let's hop right into it. So the first game I want to talk about from the second half of games is the Jets versus the Chicago Bears. So for the Jets side, Mike White looked like an absolute beast, dropping 25 fantasy points, 3 touchdowns. He was the 5th best quarterback on the week, which is crazy because we are talking about Mike White here, but he supported a great, phenomenal Jets offense, even in the rain. I mean, we saw the Jets running backs have a lot of success, 3 different ones. We see Michael Carter do decently well. We see Ty Johnson do well. We even see Zonovan Knight, who honestly, quite frankly, I've never heard of, do well. So we see a lot of these running backs actually have success here, which is great. We even see the wide receivers perform very, very well. Garrett Wilson, 95 yards and 2 touchdowns, his best game since Zach Wilson became the quarterback, because now Zach Wilson's not the quarterback. We see Elijah Moore perform fairly well. Yes, I mean, he only had 2 targets, 2 receptions, but he did have that deep touchdown. I think it was like 30-something yards that ended up sprucing up his fantasy performances for 1, and 2 shows that, I mean, he can be actually happy in this offense because he's been sad pretty much the entire year. Over on the Bears side, there's really nothing to talk about because, I mean, Trevor Siemian's the quarterback. He wasn't really able to support Byron Pringle, Chase Claypool, Patterson, and with Darnell Mooney out, there's really no wide receivers to write home about, except for potentially Claypool. I mean, 51 yards, 5 targets, that's something, I guess, but we really need to see Justin Fields back to be able to speculate on this offense. But at the running backs, we don't really need to see that. We see David Montgomery, 14 carries, 79 yards, and then 4 targets for another 34 yards. He looks pretty good, and especially in Khalil Herbert's wake, I think that David Montgomery will be a good running back. Moving on to our next game, we get the Bengals versus the Titans. First, we see Joe Burrow look pretty good in the win. Samaje Perine looks to be the clear RB1 now, with Joe Mixon out with the concussion. I mean, I imagine he probably won't play another week because Joe Mixon most likely will be back. But it is possible Joe Mixon misses another week. And if that's the case, Samaje Perine is absolutely a must start in that scenario. We see T. Higgins absolutely dominate, but we pretty much know Jamar Chase is going to be back next week. If that's the case, I think T. Higgins is still worth the start, but definitely monitor the situation so you could potentially start Boyd if Jamar Chase is out. Yes, Boyd kind of stunk this week, but we should expect Boyd to be better than this on any given week. Hayden Hurst also getting 9 targets here. That should also go down with Jamar Chase coming back, but it is still notable. On the Titans side, we see Tannehill pretty much put up his usual 12 points because Tannehill, realistically, not that great of a quarterback. I don't think anyone will fight me on something like that. Derrick Henry, 13 fantasy points, only 38 yards rushing, but 79 yards receiving, and a lot of that came on 1 breakaway run. Should have had a touchdown as well. That would have put him up to pretty much 20 fantasy points, but he did fumble on the 5-yard line. It was punched out of his hands by a Bengals defender, and Treylon Burks ended up scooping it up, padding his fantasy stats with that touchdown. Still, though, it's nice to see Treylon Burks get 6 targets, 70 yards, and then he does have the fumble recovery for a touchdown, which does get him 15 fantasy points. Moving on to our next game, we got the Falcons versus the Commanders. The Falcons didn't really look good at all this game. I mean, we see Cordarrelle Patterson actually look decent. I'll take it back. Cordarrelle Patterson looked good. But Marcus Mariota looked very bad, only 13 fantasy points. They were trying to get Tyler Algier involved, 11 carries, 54 yards. So they did so successfully, but I mean, 5.4 points is not going to cut it for the most part. I would not want to start Tyler Algier. Cordarrelle Patterson, the only running back I think you can trust in this offense because he also is getting the receiving work. And then on the wide receiver side, we see a painful performance for Drake London, only 4 targets, 29 yards, and pretty much everything else was painful from the Falcons side if you were starting any of them in fantasy. Over on the Commanders side, Heineke, same thing. Probably pretty painful if you started him. Brian Robinson looked really good out there. I mean, 18 carries, 105 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Gibson kind of being phased out more and more as the season goes on. 9 carries, 32 yards. 3 targets, 22 yards receiving. You really can't trust any of these guys except for Brian Robinson at this point. I would say Brian Robinson's the number 1. And then same thing with the Commanders receivers. You really can't trust any of these receivers, especially not with Heineke at quarterback. Curtis Samuel doing pretty much nothing. De'Ami Brown doing pretty much nothing. Terry McLaurin, I mean, actually getting 6 targets, but only 48 yards. Nothing crazy. Not what you want from a fantasy wide receiver 2, or even a flex option for that matter. Chargers versus the Cardinals, another fantastic game. I mean, it was a really fun game to watch. If you were a Herbert owner, if you were a Kyler Murray owner, especially because now Herbert finally having a good game after, crap in the bed for the most part over the past, 9-10 weeks almost, because it's week 12 now. He hasn't had a 20-point game since week 4. We finally see him have 28 fantasy points. Justin Herbert owners can breathe a collective sigh of relief. In my main league, I do own Justin Herbert, so very, very glad about this. Same thing with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray looked great out there, rushing for 56 yards and a touchdown. We see Austin Eckler perform very, very well. What a surprise. It's Austin Eckler. And then we see Keenan Allen finally come back and get 7 targets here. DeAndre Carter getting 10 targets here. This is good news for Keenan Allen because Keenan Allen opens this offense up. We haven't really seen Justin Herbert be himself without Keenan Allen. So now Keenan Allen is back. Justin Herbert is looking much more like himself yet again. Gerald Everett getting that 2-point conversion as well. That was fun to watch because I also did have Gerald Everett. But then on the Cardinals side, James Conner performs pretty well, starting to get his touchdowns back. It's a receiving touchdown. Also, 120 yards on the ground on 25 carries. I imagine he's not getting 25 carries every game, but you are very, very happy with this performance as a James Conner owner. DeAndre Hopkins looks good. As per usual, enough said. But the real storyline here is that Marquise Hollywood-Brown was able to get 7.5 fantasy points, 8 total targets in his first game back from injury, proving he is back. They're going to give him another week to rest now because they do have a bye week 13. But once he comes back, I don't think you have to worry about him at all. I would probably start him week 14 if given the opportunity, unless your wide receivers are, crazy good. Next, I want to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Seattle Seahawks. So we see Derek Carr and Geno Smith pretty much get into a shootout, but it wasn't really led by them. I guess from the Seahawks side, it was led by Geno Smith. But this Raiders game was really led by Josh Jacobs. 33 carries, 229 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. A game like this is crazy. If you're playing up against him, I'm sorry. I feel your pain. I was playing up against him too. It's a terrible feeling. It's absolutely awful because you pretty much lose your week. I'm sorry, guys. But even Amir Abdullah got a touchdown here. Mac Hollins looked good. Devontae Adams looked good. But the real story of the week, again, was Josh Jacobs. If you have Josh Jacobs, you must be super duper happy. He looks like, honestly, a league winner. That's how good he is. Because at the beginning of the season, a lot of people are writing him off because of guys like Zamir White, Brendan Bolden coming in, Amir Abdullah, because these guys legitimately threaten to take volume. Brendan Bolden, a good receiving back. Amir Abdullah, a good receiving back. But Josh Jacobs outright won the job from these players. And that's why he's able to put up performances like this and be a league winner. On the Seattle Seahawks side, we see Geno Smith look pretty good, 328 yards and 2 touchdowns. Geno Smith, I honestly think this isn't a fluke. He looks really, really good week in and week out. I used to think it was a fluke, I'll admit, but now Geno Smith just looks too good to even be considered a fluke. We got Ken Walker looking really good. That first carry he had, I'm not sure if it was first or his second, but after the Raiders turned the ball over on the first play of the game, Ken Walker had that crazy-looking touchdown, and although his stats don't really reflect it, he looked good. We also see DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett had their usual 14-ish points. Both are great wide receivers. The Rams versus the Chiefs, a little bit of a weird game. We knew the Chiefs were winning, but the line, a little bit suspect, was 16.5. Kansas City Chiefs end up winning by 16. Pat Mahomes looks good, but not great. Only 18 fantasy points. Usually we're expecting somewhere between 20 and 25. Pacheco, clear running back 1, 22 carries, 69 yards and a touchdown. So while he wasn't that efficient on the ground, still a good performance and proves he solidified as the RB1. No wide receivers really did anything on the Chiefs side as per usual. MVS, Juju, just painful to watch. None of these wide receivers all that great. Travis Kelce does the usual Travis Kelce things. 8 targets, 57 yards and a touchdown. A little underwhelming for a Kelce owner, but who cares? Not terrible. From the Rams side, really hard to dissect anything. We do see Kyren Williams becoming this RB1, but this Rams running back room has been so painful the entire year that I don't even want to say he's the RB1 because realistically, Cam Akers next week might just come out and absolutely take the job, and we just don't know. So I would stay away from all of them. I think they're worth it as bench pieces maybe, but never, ever to start at this point. Bryce Perkins, what a surprise. He stunk. He actually looked pretty good on the ground, I will say. He could run the ball and he could evade pressure, but his decision-making was terrible. Van Jefferson, leading wide receiver, enough said. Nothing great. Now, the New Orleans Saints versus the 49ers. the Saints get completely shut out. Kamara looked bad, only 7 carries, 13 yards. Does get another 7 receptions for 37 yards, but 2 fumbles lost. I mean, pretty much cost them the game, especially at the end. It literally did cost them the game. But we also see Chris Olave get 9 targets, 62 yards, and 8.7 fantasy points, which is fine. Also, Rashid Shaheed, I'm going to say it, not in redraft leagues, he's not worth it at all. But in dynasty leagues, please, go pick this guy up. I am telling you, he is an absolute worth it pickup in deep dynasty leagues. Because whenever he gets the ball in his hands, something special happens. And that's what we see yet again. I love this guy. I don't know why. I just do. Very, very speedy, very agile, and should be utilized more. On the 49ers side, we see Christian McCaffrey kind of flop, only 7 fantasy points. Jimmy G kind of flop as well. But it didn't really matter because, I mean, the 49ers only needed to score 13 points to win, so that's what they did. Jawan Jennings was the leading wide receiver. If you had Debo, if you had Ayuk, you were probably a little bit ticked off. And Kittle only having 4 fantasy points. Overall, just an annoying game from all these players. As second last game, I want to discuss, there is one more coming on. I'm recording this on Monday, so it should be coming on in a few hours. It is the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Colts. But you'll see that tomorrow. I'll probably be in a totally different shirt and everything, so it'll be a cool little transition. But either way, we got the Green Bay Packers versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts looks insane. I mean, I saw a statistic yesterday. I'm sure a lot of you saw it as well. The first quarterback with 125 rushing yards and 125 passing yards in a half. He also had 100 yards in the first quarter alone. This is why I originally was so high on Jalen Hurts, because of this rushing upside, and now he truly proves it. But he's been a much better passer than I think a lot of us expected as well. Miles Sanders looks absolutely dominant there, 21 carries, 143 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's the ultimate touchdown vulture from Jalen Hurts, but he did look really good out there, so not going to blame him there. I mean, even Kenneth Gainwell had a touchdown here. Quez Watkins, A.J. Brown looked pretty well as well. Even Devonta Smith looked decent, but again, the real storyline was Jalen Hurts and his absolute dominance as a rushing quarterback. And then on the Green Bay Packers side, we do see Jordan Love come in for a bit. I mean, 113 yards and a touchdown. Because of Aaron Rodgers' injured ribs, I mean, Jordan Love looked pretty good out there. 6-9 completions, 113 yards and a touchdown. What more can you ask for from a backup quarterback? I mean, they've kind of just been letting him develop quietly on the sidelines. But, I mean, he looks pretty good. Aaron Jones, of course, having 56 yards and a touchdown, he looked good. Even A.J. Dillon looked good, which is a little bit of a surprise considering they haven't really both looked good together at all this season. Christian Watson, as a receiver, looked absolutely phenomenal. I mean, 110 yards and a touchdown on 6 targets. Christian Watson looking like a potential league winner, and I am so happy about it. Not to brag, but I had taken him a ton in underdog fantasy, my most owned player by 12 full percent. I own him in 42% of all leagues. I think he was one of the most underrated players, and I am so happy he's going off. All right, so I'll catch you guys tomorrow, probably in a different shirt. Maybe I'll be wearing the same shirt. But either way, I'll catch you guys tomorrow for the last game, my recap of the Steelers versus the Colts. So now for the Steelers versus the Indianapolis Colts, we saw Kenny Pickett look, I would say, pretty good, honestly, all things considered, at least in the first half. In the second half, maybe not as much so, but still a decent showing from Kenny Pickett. Benny Snell took over the lead back role once Najee Harris went down with an injury. He did end up missing the rest of the game with an abdominal injury. We might be able to see him back next week, but we're not sure. Jalen Warren was inactive as well, so that's why Benny Snell was able to get the lead role. We're not sure how long this is going to last for, but definitely something worth noting. George Pickens was the leading receiver on the Steelers side. I mean, only 6 targets, 57 yards, but did decently enough with 9 fantasy points. Deontay Johnson, another 8 targets for 49 yards. This offense hasn't really looked that great for the wide receivers, and today was pretty much no exception. Even Pat Freiermuth not really doing all that well, 39 total yards on 4 targets. From the Colts side, we see Matt Ryan look pretty bad in the turnover department. I mean, he fumbled the ball quite a few times with 1 fumble lost, another 1 recovered. I mean, he's a turnover machine, no doubt about it in my mind. Jonathan Taylor finally starting to awaken yet again, 86 yards and a touchdown, 4 receptions for another 12 yards, 17 fantasy points, which is absolutely fine for Jonathan Taylor owner. You're never going to be mad at something like that. Michael Pittman, 11 targets, which is nice to see him have a boom game again because a lot of times, I mean, he's looked pretty bad this season. Paris Campbell with only 2 receptions and Alec Pierce with not a single reception this game. Jelani Woods actually took over as the leading target pretty much for all tight ends because he had 9 targets and 98 yards. He was getting the ball left and right. It felt like every play they were giving the ball to Jelani Woods. They're getting the ball to Jelani Woods or Michael Pittman. But anyways, guys, that is going to be it for the video. Hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, go ahead and give this video a like. Again, I'm answering every single fantasy football related comment. So guys, if you have any questions, please go down below. Do not hesitate to ask. And subscribe to the channel. Turn that notification bell on so you don't miss another video. With that, guys, I will see you guys later. Have a good day, a good night, and a good life.